So hello, welcome to the webinar on using Accuri CFlow data in FCS Express. What we're going to cover today is the highlights that you see listed on the screen right now. We're going to go over why would you want to use CFlow data in FCS Express, and then how to use the CFlow importer, how to open CFlow data files directly, and then another important question is how to work with the full range of data that CFlow exports, because as you may know, the C6 instrument generates a much higher dynamic range than most instruments out there. So you need special considerations on dealing with the full range of data. And finally, we'll look at importing a plate. I'll give you a little preview of that. We have other webinars and other information on using the high content module in FCS Express, and I'll just show you how to use that with the CFlow sampler. So what today's webinar won't be is going over the details of how to analyze your data in FCS Express or in the CFlow software for that matter. We're assuming that you have some knowledge of how to use the CFlow software and that you may or may not have knowledge of FCS Express. But we have several other webinars and many resources on our website available for you to learn about that. So I'm going to take you through the basics of using the CFlow data in FCS Express, and then you'll be able to ask any questions you have about that or about other questions about FCS Express during the course of this webinar. Just feel free to type them into the question and answer box. And we have Tanya helping out today. She's going to be answering all the questions that you type in. So to get started, why would you want to use FCS Express with your CFlow data? So what you can do in the CFlow software is acquire your data, look at your plots, create gates, look at statistics. So it's a very user-friendly package. It makes it very easy for you to work with your C6 instruments, and it takes you some way to doing your analysis and looking at statistical values of your plots. But where FCS Express comes in is in the power of all of the different tools that we bring to flow cytometry analysis and the ease of use. So the first thing you'll notice is that the screen you're looking at right now looks like PowerPoint or Word or something like that, but this is actually FCS Express that I've typed up this highlights and the resources section on this page. So what we do in FCS Express is we allow you to make full reports inside the software. You can see this looks like PowerPoint, and these are really just text boxes that I can manipulate and change the color and change everything else, and I can undo. Now I'm not going to go over the basics of how FCS Express is like PowerPoint or Word. We have other webinars that take you in more depth of that. But we've designed FCS Express to be easy to use because most people are familiar with using the Microsoft Office package, so we make FCS Express in that vein, so it's one less thing that you have to learn. Now FCS Express also has a lot of other tools for running batches on your data files. It has tools for creating PowerPoint and PDF documents easily. You can create publication quality graphics in many different graphics formats and resolutions. You can create your own statistics. You can graph statistics in FCS Express. And you can look at other data as well, not just CFlow data. Now, you may know that what I'm showing you right now is FCS Express version 4. It's fairly new. We came out with it in January and has a number of improvements, including UI improvements and tools improvements to the previous versions. So some of you on this call may have FCS Express version 3. Most of what I show you will apply to FCS Express version 3 as well, but some will be new in version 4. And you can feel free to ask if version 3 has this or that. And you're also free to download a demo, and I'll show you the resources on our website to do that afterwards. Okay, so the first thing I want to do right now is flip into the CFlow software. So what you're looking at right now is CFlow. This is actually the CFlow sampler software, so that we can use it with our high content analysis tools. So I won't get into how that works inside CFlow. I'm not an expert on that software, but we do need it to generate the plate information for FCS Express. So the two key tabs that I want to look at inside CFlow are this, the Manual tab, the Manual Collect tab, and the Analyze tab. So you see that CFlow has several plots open right now. There are several gates and quadrants and all of that. The Collect tab is only showing you one data file at a time. As I click on different data files, it switches. In the Analyze tab, which I'm going to click on right now, you can see that there are a number of different plots. Each one is showing a different data file. There are gates. They all have percentages and quadrants and so on. And I can scroll down here and you can see there's many more plots to find, including a histogram with a couple of overlays. So what we do with the CFlow importer in FCS Express is take that one single file, the C6 file that contains all of this information, all of the data, all of the plots and gates, and import that directly into FCS Express and turn that into an FCS Express analysis document, which is also called a layout file. So I'm going to click back on the FCS Express and go to the Application button. In version 4, we now have an Application button in the ribbon style rather than the old File menu. So we go to the Open Layout and look at the Import External Documents area. You can see we have Import BD FAXDIVA, Import Accuri CFlow. So I'm going to click on Import Accuri CFlow, and it prompts me with a dialog to find what the file is. And I'm going to open up the demo file, and it's now going to ask me the first question. So there's only a couple of questions in this wizard, but they're important. Do you want to import the plots that you were looking at on the Collect tab or the Analyze tab, or both? Now, if I leave the Collect tab checked off, then I can choose any of the data files that are located inside the C6 file. But for this purpose, I'm going to uncheck that and just import what was in the Analyze tab. And I click Next. Now it's going to ask some questions about how big do you want the plots to be, how do you want them laid out, how many plots per row, and so on, and whether you want this to be portrait and landscape. I'm just going to keep the defaults and press Finish. And what we get right now is a page full of plots that were, which is exactly what we were looking at in CFlow. We have all of the plots here and the various gates that we were looking at. We have the histogram here. And not only that, but because there were many plots on different pages, sorry, there are many plots in the Analyze section in CFlow, we've moved them into 3 pages. And you can see we have page 2 with some more plots, and there are blank areas inside here. These blank areas match what was in the CFlow software as well, and page 3 has even more. Now this page flipping feature is new to FCS Express version 4, and if I can just show off something else very quickly, if you wanted to look at more than one page at a time, it's very easy to do that using our 2-page view. Okay, but I'm going to go back to the 1-page view for the purpose of this demo. Just know that as I'm showing you, what I'm showing you is the tip of the iceberg of what you can do in FCS Express. So to highlight what we're looking at here, I'm going to flip back very quickly into CFlow and scroll up to the top. And you can see that on, say, on the top left plot, we have on the x-axis, it is going from 0 to 16 million. This is the full set of range. The 0 to 16.7 million is the full set of range in CFlow. But on the y-axis, it's only going from 0 to 6.9 million. That's because this plot was zoomed. So because of the huge range in CFlow, they have a very handy zoom feature that lets you highlight particular populations. And if I click on this button, it unzooms it. If I click on the zoom, I can now go in and just look at a subset. Now FCS Express recreates that when you import the plots. So on this top left plot, you can see that on the bottom it's going to 1.3 times 10 to the 7 isn't the far right, but matches this this axis tick. So this is really 17 million on the bottom, and on the top it's 7 times 10 to the 6, so it's 7 million on the top. And to get a better look at that, what I'm going to do is maximize. This is a handy feature that we have in FCS Express that if you want to drill in a little bit and see the plot, see the full plot, but the plots are too small to manipulate the gates, then you can use a maximize, and it fills up the whole page. And we had one question come in that since the sampler and CFlow both produce C6 files, you can import from either. Yes, that is correct. FCS Express can import from either one. The only time, excuse me, my throat's a little dry. The only time you need to use the sampler is if you want to import plate information. Okay, so now that I've zoomed, now that I've maximized this plot, I can show you how the zooming works in FCS Express. Now it's not, the terminology is not called zoom because we have a zoom feature that works like it would in PowerPoint or other Office software that just zooms the entire document. So instead what we do is call it magnify. And we have two kinds of magnify here. They're key. I'll talk about them a little in a second. But for CFlow data, what you would want to use is the magnify resolution. And if I click on magnify resolution, I can now drag open a rectangle on any part of the data, and that part gets magnified and the plot gets filled with that. And if I want to undo that, I can unmagnify. Or of course I can use the undo feature that we have for every function that you do in FCS Express. There is an undo, and there's an unlimited number of undos that you can perform. We default the number to 30, but you can make that bigger or smaller. So the other kind of resolution that you saw when I right-clicked here was Magnify Axis. So Magnify Axis does a similar thing. The only difference has to do with how flow plots are divided into resolutions and into bins. The Magnify Axis does not perform a rebinning. The Magnify resolution does perform a rebinning. The side effect of doing the Magnify Axis for CFlow data will be that the dots will get very big, and I will demonstrate that just through here. So this isn't something that you would probably want to look at. So let's unmagnify the axis. With other kinds of data where the dynamic range is not so big, then it's much less of an issue. So you can choose to use either one. It will affect when you zoom with the resolution, for statistical purposes, all of the values that are outside of the range get included on the axis. When you zoom with the axis, the values get included where they were originally. So that's another subtle difference. But the differences in statistics will be extremely minor. Let me restore that. Okay. Now, some of you may also notice here, as I'm looking at these plots, that if you've used FCS Express before, you'll notice that the defaults are a little bit different. The titles here are in green and don't have the border. I played around with the titles a little bit in the preferences so that they would take up less room. And of course, changing any options on the titles in FCS Express is very easy. I can select many plots at the same time, go to Title, and if I want my font to be maroon, I can do that. Now, everything that you see about this plot is customizable. And like I've said before, you can find out the details of that in other webinars and in many other resources on our website. You'll also notice in FCS Express that, or you also notice in this plot that the quads were imported. The statistics are exactly the same as they were in CFlow, except we're showing 2 decimal places. They were showing 1 decimal place. The same goes for the histogram markers and the gate statistics as well. There's another question coming in. Can you type in the axis values directly instead of having to magnify? And the answer is yes. So I can, to show you how that would work, is let's go back to this first plot. And I can, if I right-click on Format and go into the Bin Plot Specific Options, I can now type in whatever I want in the resolution options. So that's very easy to do. And if I want to do them on these three plots at the same time, I simply go to the specific options, and now I type them in that I want to go from 50 to 500. And the data disappeared, but it's doing exactly what I asked it to do, so I will undo that. And you can also do that in the general preferences instead of having to do that on a plot-by-plot basis. One thing that you will look different between FCS Express and the software in CFlow is the density plots in FCS Express come out in color, whereas in CFlow they were grayscale. You can have the same effect. Our density and contour plots have a lot of options. In the color levels, you can see that we're using what we call the rainbow palette. But if you want the inverse grayscale, it's going to look a lot more like it did inside CFlow. And if I press preview, you get a look of how that looks. This uses a fixed range. You can set up your ranges based on a mean plus or minus standard deviations, and so the appearance of your plot will change based on how you want to do that. So as you're preparing your plots for publication or for reporting, you have many options of how you want to look at it. Can you rename the parameters in FCS Express, or do you need to do it in CFlow? You're probably better off if you do it in CFlow, because when you import it, you will have the values. In FCS Express, you can use what we call parameter label sets. You could change the values of the data files directly. We don't recommend that, simply because then your data won't be the same as what it originally came in as. But if you always know that your parameter 3 is a certain stain and your parameter 4 is a certain marker, you can do that using the parameter label sets. And we can send you a link after that for documentation on using parameter label sets in FCS Express. What it would look like in the plot is simply right-click, go to Axis, and choose a parameter label set. Now you can see that this is grayed out because I don't have any label sets defined. But if you define a label set, then you will be able to do that. So the other thing I wanted to show you very briefly is how the gating is applied. You can see that back in CFlow, we have all of the plots have different gates. The center top plot, for example, has a P2 in all gate, and we'll show you that in FCS Express. And if we look down on the left, we have a plot that has a very sophisticated gating strategy. Now CFlow lets you just include, exclude, or choose an intersection of whatever gates and markers and quadrants you have defined, and you tick things on and off. So when doing the import, FCS Express figures out what you were trying to do and creates what we call a combination gate to support that. So that's a Boolean gate. And if I go to the gating tab, you can see that this particular plot is using the gate for plot density 7. Now what is the definition for that? Well, if I want to look at the definition, I'm going to insert what we call our gate view, which it gives you a hierarchical look at what is in your gates. And the gate for plot density 7, if I double click on it, you can see that this formula consists of the gate P2 in plot, or M2 in all, and not M3 in all, and etc., etc., etc. So whatever you chose to do in CFlow, FCS Express recreates that gate. And finally, when you look at the histogram that got created, you notice that the statistics came with it, and I can play around with a lot of options on the histogram So for example, if I want to change how they look, I can fill them up, and maybe I want to look at them in 3D. And I would also want to change the color to make them look better. So there are a lot of different histogram options. I can also stack them. There's a lot of flexibility. Now, as far as looking at the gates go, what I showed you was our gate view. If you want to do a more sophisticated look and see all of the gates and what plots are gated on different things, if I go to the View tab, I can look at the Gate Navigator. And I'm going to dock the Gate Navigator over to the right side. Let me do that a little more slowly because you may not have seen that. So we have a new infrastructure in version 4 that allows docking. So a Gate Navigator shows you all of the gates and what plots are on all of the gates. So it opens up in the middle, and then as I move it around, you can see that as I select these different arrows in the middle of the page, I get an arrow pointing to the right, and it shows me it moves the Gate Navigator over to the right docked. And as I open up each one of these, it will tell me what plots are gated on it. And of course, if I can just select these plots that are gated on it. And I picked something that was gated on page 2, and it jumped to page 2, and now it jumped back to page 1. So the Gate Navigator is a handy way to take a look at all your gates and see what plot is gated on each one. Another important thing when importing the data is to see what data files got imported. So we were working with a C6 data file, and C6 is the full set of data and also the gating and plot information. But inside there are individual data files. And if I open the data list is another one of these dockable windows. And I'm going to take this, and this one I'm going to dock inside the Gate Navigator. So I can now look at them both together, docked onto the right side. I'm going to scroll that up. And you can see all of these different data files that I imported. Now, being able to see all of these different data files is very useful because this data list is actually what gets used in batch processing. And so if you want to scroll through a number of different plots, either just on the page or while exporting statistics, then you would do that by setting up the data list. So when you import using the CFlow importer, the data list gets set up properly for you. Okay, so I've been talking until now about how to use the importer. You can use FCS Express with or without the importer. Now, the importer is an add-on to the program, so if you choose not to purchase the importer add-on, you can simply use a data file by itself. Now, what it would look like is this. I'm going to start with a new layout and go to Insert, and let's insert a contour plot. And I'm just going to drag open a contour plot on the screen. It asks me what file do I want, and I'm going to select the demo data file and double-click on it. Now at this point, it didn't open a plot because it knows that there are many files inside that C6 file. Now this is important to note. There is no other third-party software that can do this, that can open up the C6 file and ask you which of the contained files are in it. With other software, what you have to do is go to the CFlow software and export multiple FCS files. But FCS Express can just read it from the C6 file. So I'm going to choose one of the samples contained inside. And it opens up with the forward scatter and side scatter, and I can choose any of the parameters. Now this data file did not have labeled parameters, so we're just getting FL3 and FL2, not very useful labels, but it gives you an idea for what's here. And of course, from this point, we don't need to be looking at the full range of data, so I can do a magnify and just show the part that I'm interested in. And from here, you now have access to all of the tools that FCS Express has to offer. So let me show you again the data list, and dock the data list over. And what I'm going to do, actually not only will I show you the data list, but I will also show you another view called the Data Navigator. The Data Navigator doesn't just show you what's in the list for batch processing. Instead, what it shows you is the files that are currently active. So this is showing sample 1, sample E01, I should say. And if I try to batch from this plot to the next file, what it should show me is it should switch to G02. And as I go into data, I'm going to click next, and it switched to G02, and our Data Navigator updated as well. If you want to actually create a new plot with the next data file, all I have to do is go duplicate and next, and up pops a new plot with the next file in the list, which is F03. Okay, so this is just a quick preview of how to use some of these features in FCS Express. Again, these are detailed in other webinars and in our documentation. So does anyone have any questions about, any other questions about the import so far? My plan now is to show you a little bit of the high content and how the heat maps work, but I'll take questions right now and answer anything that you have outstanding before going on. So we have a question: when you import, do your stats get imported, or does FCS Express generate them? So FCS Express generates the stats. And if you update your gates or markers or anything, everything in FCS Express updates. The stats are not static at all. So for example, if I go back to the file I imported, you notice that P2 here is showing a statistic of 98.76. If I move this gate, it's now 44%. And it's now 49%. So all of the statistics are inside FCS Express. Now this statistic here is just one way of showing the statistics. We have many other ways of showing you and exporting and working with the statistics. But they all will update as you move around your gates and data and markers. So I hope that answers the question. So the last thing I want to show you is how to open a heat map. Now the heat map is going to show you information from all of the data files in the plate, all of the tubes in the plate, and you can play around with it a little bit. So what we do is we insert a new kind of plot for version 4 called a heat map, and I'm going to click on the heat map and drag it open on the page. Again, it asks me for the file, but remember how last time when it showed me the file, I double-clicked in demo file and it opened up the subfiles. This time, when I double-click on it, it's simply going to open that file because it knows that it needs to use all of the data inside. And this C6 file includes all the wells from A1 to G1. It doesn't have anything else, but because it is a 96 well plate, it's going to show everything. It's going to show all of the area over here, even though no tubes were required. So the questions that you'd have when looking at this are, what are these colors based on? You can see that we're showing the well parameter, and we're showing a statistic to generate these colors from forward scatter. Okay, and if I format the plot, we'll show you more information about what that is. So if I go to the Overlays tab, you can see that there are two parameters for the heat map. There's the well parameter and the statistic parameter. And here we're showing the arithmetic mean statistic. Now this could be anything. This was just the default, the first one in the list that showed up. If you want your heat map to be defined on anything else, even number of events, you can do that. If you want it to be gated, you can do that. And if I preview, of course the colors are going to update. The colors themselves, the color scheme is a red to green color scheme green to red, where green is the lowest value. But in the heat map color levels, that's all customizable. So if I change this from the green to red, you can see we have that rainbow palette as well. Go back to the green to red, and the coloring comes from a mean plus or minus standard deviation. Right now, most things are black, so most things are right around the mean. If we lower the number of standard deviations needed to change the color and press preview, more things light up in green and red. Now, if you want to see the actual values from here, you can insert a text box and insert a heat map stats grid. Right-click, insert heat map stats grid, and this is going to create tokens for everything in here. So the values here come from tokens, and as I update the plot, these values are going to update. And finally, I can create gates based on these wells. Create a gate, a well gate, and then I can choose which. I'm just going to select a couple of wells here, and I say OK. I now made a new well gate, and if I open a dot plot, I can actually gate on that gate that I just created. Of course, if I edit the gate and change what is in the gate, my dot plot on the bottom is going to update. Okay, so this is just to give you a brief idea of what the capabilities of the high content analysis are. It's what I recommend is watching the webinar. Sean goes into great detail and gives a lot of information on using the high content throughput, or the high content analysis module in FCS Express. So that's all the information that I wanted to cover for now. What I will do is just show you where you can find where you can find these recorded webinars. Let's just come back to this page. So we have many resources on our website. We have the CFlow tips. We have upcoming and recorded webinars. We have our manual and support forums. All of these you can get to from our home page. And our home page, let me move it over here. You can see right in the middle of the home page, we have the upcoming webinars, what's new, batch processing, and today's webinar, which is displaying Accuri CFlow data. So you've all found this page, but let's take a look at it and see what's coming up. Now, so we haven't added, but next week we will be having some more webinars. And on the recorded webinar page, we have many, including the introduction to image, what's new in FCS Express 4, and the high content analysis. And we did another webinar yesterday on batch processing, and we're going to add that to our recorded webinars very shortly, and we will add this one today as well. So you can if you want to look again at the highlights or at the content of today's webinar, you will be able to see that starting tomorrow, or pass around the link to other people for them to look at it as well. So if there are any other questions, then please let me know. Let me scan through the question list. I don't see any other questions coming in. You can always reach us if you have more questions at support@denovosoftware.com. Let me come and highlight that. That is the place to reach all of us, and we will be happy to answer anything you have. I almost forgot. I wanted to thank Dave Hawking at Accuri for providing the data file that we've been using today. I haven't mentioned anything about the contents or the analysis of it. It's what that data file is a baculovirus titration, and he was kind enough to let us use that. So we appreciate that, and Any other questions, just feel free to send them to us at support@denovosoftware.com. Thank you for attending today's webinar, and we look forward to seeing you in future webinars. Thanks.